Welcome to the Enduro Method Podcast. Enduro Method is an online strength and conditioning program built for those who ride by those who ride. We are professional coaches dedicated to building the best and most revolutionary off-the-bike training for dirt bikers around. We are offering a special discount for our podcast listeners. Use discount code EMPodcast22 for 50% off your first month. For more information, head to the description of this podcast where you can find the discount code and a link for more information and to sign up. Today on the show, we have a very special guest, Jon Seehorn. Jon is the owner and founder of SXSlideplate. Jon and Josh had a great conversation learning about the origin of SXS and how he started building bike protection in his spare time, which eventually led to where he is today. Jon is also a past ISDE racer and looking to get back into the competitive scene this year. All right, without further ado, please enjoy our interview with Jon Seehorn from SXSlideplate.
Cool. So yeah, I'm stoked. I think this will be fun.
Yeah.
Super interested in just like, how you got started and what you're doing in the future and all that stuff. But maybe start out with we could start just kind of like your work history, riding history, how you imagine it's kind of like labor of love a little bit, right? You saw something that wasn't great that you thought you could do better. And that's how it was kind of born. So,
So I started back 2005, building my own stuff at that point, just because there wasn't a good option on the market for me. I had aluminum plates that just didn't hold up, or they'd bend and they would rattle and they wouldn't fit right after a couple of races or a couple of hits, and tried some carbon fiber stuff and cracked and broke those. And I finally was running absolutely nothing on the bike for a while. And I started working at an RV shop, and they had this UHMW material we put on the bottom of all the slide rooms for coaches. So I'm like, hey, can I take a piece of that? I want to build a plate for my motorcycle. And they're like, yeah, we got sheets of it. Go ahead and just cut out what you need. And so I cut out a shape and used all the mounts from the aluminum plate and bolted it on. And that was it. It was just really good. So from then on, just kind of kept progressing it and refining it. And that bike was a XCW, so it didn't have linkage at that point. And so it was just a PDS plate originally, and in the white material, which everything was originally white before I went to the black material. But I wound up getting a semi-support Suzuki ride in 2008. And there was a bunch of enduro crosses. Enduro cross was like just starting to get popular, and we had like 10 rounds locally. And so I wound up beating the linkage on the bike so much. I'm like, well, why don't I just take it and move it all the way back over the linkage? And so I moved it back over the linkage, and the slide plate was born. It was from that point on, we had linkage guards, and it just kind of progressed from there, and wound up going to a bunch of the national rounds. Started to get popular about the end of 2009, 2010. They had some early ones like 2006 were like an invitation only down in Vegas, like a one and done race. That I didn't get invited to the first time. The second round I did qualify in they had a day qualifier the day before, and people just kind of started looking at my bike like, where'd you get that plate? It's like, oh, I built it. And 1 turned into 10 and 10 turned into 100. And I was like, well, shoot, I think I got a business here. I need to figure out how to do this a little quicker than cutting them all out by hand.
And what was your kind of background going in? Like, how did you have the skill set to even start doing that?
So I was a full ASE mechanic up until honestly last year. I was still a full-time ASE master mechanic, and so I had a pretty good skill set of background. And then when we had moved to Seattle for my wife's job, and then I wanted to race more, was kind of the reasoning we moved to Seattle, just because there was more racing in that area in Washington. We wound up working on RVs, so then my skill set kind of got even more rounded. We did a lot of cabinet work, and we worked with UHMW on all the slide rooms to help them slide in. We fixed a lot of weird problems that didn't get fixed out of the gate or from the manufacturer. So that kind of gave me a little more rounded background and working with different tools and materials. And so kind of honestly, the RV job is kind of what made the whole thing happen.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, that's probably like with the RV stuff, very much jack of all trades, master of none idea. Just you come really
Yes.
good at like being inventive and coming up with stuff.
Yes, it was a very big change from automotive, where you have a lot of resources, a lot of the manufacturers put out wiring diagrams and composites on how to do things, and in everything's kind of pretty much laid out from the manufacturer, where the RVs are not. It's just thrown together, and it's pretty amazing that they stay together for as poorly as they're put together. But coming from automotive to that world was a huge shock for me, going, okay, well, where's the wiring diagram for this? Like, well, they don't have those. So you're tracing wires and figuring stuff out, and you're like, well, where's the schematic on this cabinet that's built that we need to take out? I'm like, yeah, they don't have those either. So it was a lot of figured out. Yeah. Jack of all trades, master of none, for sure.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Yeah, I was a big woodworker for a long time, and that's up until about a year ago. I kind of stepped away from doing that too. But it's, you go from like housing cabinetry to then I kind of built out the trailer, and it's just a completely different world, because one, you're worried about weight and trying to keep things as light and durable as possible. But when you're doing stuff in a house, you don't even think twice about a little bit extra weight here or there. So
right.
Different mentality for sure.
Yep.
So when you were doing it, you started out with full aluminum plates on the bottom?
Yeah, when I originally started racing, aluminum was kind of the only thing that there was. Cherubies had a plastic plate like really early on, and they went away from it for a lot of years. And then aluminum kind of took over. And so, I mean, I started racing started finally get fast, like 90, 96, 97, qualified for 6 days in 2000. And that's kind of when I started racing more, was once I qualified for 6 days and I came back. The work series got super popular. And at that time, yeah, aluminum was really the only way. Carbon fiber kind of came up a little after 2000. And so you dabbled in both of those, but just neither of them would really hold up to off-road abuse.
Yeah. Yeah. And they definitely don't slide too well, right?
Correct. Yeah. And that was the definite attribute to the plastic, is it just slides so much better than the aluminum. The coefficient of friction is remarkably higher than either the aluminum or carbon fiber.
Yeah. So when did you officially kind of start SXS?
Officially 2010. So once things finally kind of started to get a little more popular and people started noticing, and I originally started with just the linkage guard, and didn't dabble in full plates until 2012. But once I came out the linkage guard, there was a couple other guys that started to notice and were building the same thing. And at that point, I was building full plates for my bikes. I just wasn't offering them to the public yet. And I was doing the onesie twosies for some friends and some other riders. And at that point, I just decided it needed to be done and just do full plates for everything instead of just a linkage guard.
So when you went to the full plate originally, what did your operation look like? I mean, were you cutting them out flat with like a bandsaw kind of thing, or what that look
Yep,
like?
literally cutting them out in my shop, just a 20 by 20 shop at my house, and cutting them out all by hand, just using a skill saw, and had my templates made out of cardboard that I'd lay down and trace out the shape and cut it and hand file all of them down to where I'd make them nice and smooth. And then still use propane today, is the quickest way to heat them and bend them. But I was using a smaller propane torch basically just to heat where I bent them. I didn't heat the whole plate like I do now, but yeah, they were all one by one. And I started getting into like the hundreds, and I went, I got to figure something else out. And I had a buddy that did countertops, and he had a routing device that he used. So we took the template to that and just made a template so we could route them all out. And he finally got to the point where it was more cumbersome for him to keep cutting my plates out for me. So he's like, you got to figure something else out. We need to figure the CNC or something out. And at that point, Jeremy Deming from Jerem Designs knew a buddy that had a CNC shop, or a sign shop is what it was. They did a ton of signs for him. And so we loaded it into the computer. Jerem helped me with all that, get all the shapes and everything put in, and then send them to the sign company, and they'd cut all the shapes out for me. So it kind of just progressed from literally by hand to a little more automated to fully automated, and having a CNC company do everything, all the flat shapes anyways.
And then from there, you just heat them up and bend them into place. And
Yep. Everything's still heated and bent in-house. So every single plate that gets bolted on is bent with my two hands. So it's, I don't know if everybody knows that, but you call and order a plate and you don't realize there's a guy behind it that's literally bending every single one by hand. So,
right.
And I've tried a couple companies to see if they could build it for me, which there is. You can go through it. Just the molds are super expensive, and then the turnaround time is super slow. So it kind of came down to a cost over production problem. And it's like, well, I can still do them in-house quicker than we can if I farm it out to a thermoform company that can build a mold and do it with a mold portion. So
right, with that mold, it would almost be like something like a ski press, right? Like you would have to have, and then every single plate that's massively different, you'd have to have a different mold for that and everything else.
Exactly. Yep. So yeah, it'd be a positive and negative mold, and then every single one's different. So and molds are not cheap,
right?
Cheap to get done. By the time they get all done, you can do some ones out of wood and some stuff like that and vacuum form them that way. But aluminum, an actual aluminum mold, positive and negative molds, the way to do it. And they're just expensive to get the first mold done. And then if you want more molds on top of that, they're each anywhere from the $6,000 to $10,000 range per mold, which I looked through. I got 162 SKUs right now. So that's a lot of molds to go through.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I remember, I think it was like 2000, I want to say maybe 16 is when I don't even remember where. It was probably social media somewhere, but I saw that with you guys, and then that you were are you in Idaho right now, or are you in Seattle?
I am just inside Washington. So yeah, I can see Idaho from the window, but I'm about 4 miles from the Idaho border now.
Okay. And I had heard, that you were either in North Idaho or close. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Somebody, kind of local to us is building this stuff. And I bought the first one, and basically put them on everything I've had since.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm about a half hour from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and about 20 minutes from Spokane Valley.
Yeah. So you did 6 days back in like 2000. And then when did you start riding?
So I started riding at the age of 5, and me and my 3 brothers and my dad and grandpa rode as well. So we mostly trail rode. We didn't race much. We do, maybe 1 or 2 races a year, local St. Mary's race. I didn't really start racing more till I was about 15, 16. We'd travel a little bit, Desert 100, travel to Murphy, travel to Idaho City, do a few of those, but didn't race a ton till I was 18. Never touched a motocross track till after I was out of the house. Dad was not okay with motocross tracks, and I totally understand for the aspect of getting hurt. So I didn't really even touch a motocross track till I got back from 6 days and started racing the Work Series. The Work Series basically had a motocross track in it at some point through the event. So I had to figure out how to ride motocross for one. Yeah. I didn't know, like I had no idea. So it was a little bit of a learning curve. And the first one I went to, I'm rolling all the jumps going, okay, I'm going to figure this out. I'm losing way too much time in the motocross track.
Yeah. It's like the
race.
The curse of the trail rider, right?
Yep.
I mean, like besides little jibs or whatever off the side, you start to see a table, and God forbid there's a space between the two ends, right? You're like, oh shit.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So what got you in? Was it just works and you got hooked and like, I want to do this and get faster? And
Yeah, I mean, really, it was 6 days that kind of got the race itch going for me. I went to France in 2001 and just really liked it. Really loved the event. The crowds over there are absolutely amazing. It's pretty cool to see the international form of motorcycles. They just go absolutely bonkers over there. So it was super fun. And Works at that time was the biggest form we had on the West Coast. Hare and Hounds, I did a few Hare and Hounds at that time too, but Works kind of took over. The Hamels did a really good job with that series early on, and it was, there'd be 30, 40 pros on the line for a 3-hour event. It was super fun. So I just kind of got hooked on those and rode those till about 2008.
Then since then, what have you kind of pursued? I know you do some of the hard enduro stuff. I mean, that's kind of more what I'm familiar with, but I've seen you some of those. And what's that morph like now too with the business and everything else?
Hard enduro has been awesome. So it's been really good for business. It's really nice to see that series come full circle. And it's like I say, in Europe, it's been huge forever to have these hard enduro events, and so it's nice to finally see that pick up over here. And Endurocross kind of preempted that, so both of those were really good for me. And Endurocross was kind of the Kickstarter to my plate business, because everybody was trying to figure out how to ride over all these obstacles. It was not really a thing until it got popular 2008 to 10ish, and it just really helped out. And I was hitting a lot of those events to where guys were asking me, hey, can you build this for me? Can you build that for me? And everybody's just trying to figure out that, and tire combos, and how to make everything work properly for these harder obstacles.
Right. What, so you've come out since then after kind of the slide plate beginning. What kind of preempted the idea of moving into, you do some handguards, and now you're doing some lower fork protection as well?
The handguards were actually born out of a necessity as well. I'd loaned my bike to a guy from St. Mary's. He had a bike malfunction, and I was going to be gone that weekend, so I loaned him my 350 KTM, and he raced it down at St. Mary's and actually ripped a handguard off of it. So Austin Schurmeister is the result for that handguard being made, and it was actually the first Silver Mountain race they had. I needed something to put on there, so I actually took a linkage guard from the slide plate and bolted it to the stock KTM handguards, and that was it. I ran it up there as I was sweep riding and building course, and hit a couple trees along the ways. I'm like, wow, these are really good. So handguards were born shortly after that. I wound up making a shape, and we still use that shape today. It's a little bit different. We're actually working on a newer, updated version to that shape as well, just to freshen it up a little bit. But and then once I did the KTM one, everybody's like, well, do you have them for Hondas? Do you have them for Betas? Do you have them for Shercos? I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'll get there. And so I built a mount, which we're on version 3 now. So just a super sturdy flag style mount to go on the handlebars. So if you don't have a KTM Husky, you can run that mount.
Yeah, the handguard thing's always been interesting, because like most of flag stuff is fairly, I don't want to say useless, it's not fair, but it's not too much protection.
Right.
Let's say.
Right. Yeah. And I ran every flag there was on the market. I personally broke my arm in a set of wraparounds.
Okay.
And I know a lot of guys say, I've never heard of anybody breaking their arm. I'm like, well, I personally broke both bones of my left arm getting stuck in a set of wraparounds. So I quit running them after that, and was running, everything from a Cherubies to Cycra to, everyone on the market. And, you bend them or break them, or they just don't offer very much rigidity to protect anything. So that was kind of nice to actually come out, and actually ran the stock KTM ones for a long time. They were about the best on the market at that time. And it was really good to get that added to the line, just a lot beefier version of a flag style without the consequence of a wraparound.
Yeah, when you did it with the wraparound, how'd that happen?
Literally just a second gear tip over in a corner, down at St. Mary's, practicing for the event, and cruising through the field, and kind of looking around, just checking stuff out, and I washed the front end, and when I went down, it broke both bones on the side of the handguard on the wraparound.
Yeah, that's been so similar experience, only the opposite way. I was running wraparounds forever, and then finally I'm like, oh, I want to start trying to learn, more trialsy stuff on the big bike. And I was like, I really don't want to stuff a hand through in the front, like going over the bars on a rock or something. So ran flags, and then just up in Montana, cruising single track, no issues, big rock. And there was a tree stump cut off an inside corner at handlebar height, and clipped it in between flag. I mean, it was, like nothing was there. And shattered the pinky, screws, plate surgery, almost had to have it amputated kind of thing. And like, so it's always been a question of where do you run, like, which is better? And I feel like it's kind of sixes, if you potentially never get hurt, wraparounds are great. And if you run flags, you never get hurt. Flags are great.
Right. Yeah. It's really, both are good. I mean, it's just a personal preference, really. I still got, a lot of guys that like to run wraparounds, and that's just fine. I mean, if that's what you're used to and you're comfortable with it, go ahead. If you want a beefier version of a flag to give you the little bit of both worlds, then mine's probably the next best in line for the mix of two.
Yeah, totally. And that's where I was kind of going, is like, I like the idea of yours. I was always kind of replaying it in my mind. I was like, I wonder if I had those burley guards on, if that would have been enough to just deflect, on that inside corner. I would have taken a crash any day over. I mean, I didn't even fall over, but the finger took the brunt of it.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the one nice thing with the burley beefy combo, is it does give you a little bit of a warning. You'll clip the handguard and it'll almost kind of deflect it, but it has enough give to where it doesn't throw you offline, is the other nice thing about that rigidity of that guard. It flexes just enough where a wraparound doesn't flex, so it can actually hit and throw you down or throw you off course. So it's just a good mix of both worlds.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I'm looking forward to getting some on. I went for one, like my first ride back on the bike after the getting the okay, and I had left the flags on, and I was like, fuck this, I'm way too scared. So I ended up putting wraparound. I thought, I was like, all right, maybe I'll get back at some point. What's been the best thing for you as far as like advertising and all that stuff? Has it just been showing up at events, word of mouth, people seeing it and going from there? Or?
Word of mouth was definitely the best right out of the gate. Social media was just finally starting to come full circle about the time I was hitting the Endurocross series, when it was in its real big prime early on. So it was really just getting out there and being at the events and, showing people why you want a linkage guard. That was the hardest thing. I really didn't think it was going to be that hard of a sell, but a lot of guys and a lot of riders were just, why do I need that? Nobody runs that. Nobody has one of those. And so it was a kind of a slow learning process. It was actually, took me a good 3-4 years to finally get people to start realizing. It wasn't really till about 14 that it really started to finally pick up, and guys were noticing, hey, I need a linkage guard to get over stuff. I'm just getting hung up all the time. So it was really good. Destry Abbott was a huge help for me. Jeff Aaron was a huge help for me. They ran it super early on, which was really, really good to have those two guys on board. And then everybody's kind of slowly followed after that. We kind of started to realize that, this linkage guard really does help get up over stuff. Yeah. So it worked really good. Like Instagram, Facebook was finally kind of getting popular. So social media was definitely a huge help too, just to get it out there in front of more people than just the Endurocross guys.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting that just the social media thing, it's definitely revolutionized. Well, for good and bad in some ways, for sure. But
right.
From being able to reach people that you'd never have contact with otherwise is really good, really cool.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's a good platform. Like you say, it's got its ups and downs, but it's definitely nice to be able to get out in front of the world instead of just local Endurocross, or, primarily I was just West Coast early on, and now it's everywhere from East Coast to Australia to Europe to everywhere. And I was super fortunate to have Husqvarna run it early on. I had Haker and Mike Brown run it in the Durocross series, and the European guys showed up for a one-off event, and we're all riding bikes with my plates on it. And Jarvis and Bolt were going, "Hey, where do you get that plate at? We need those things overseas." And that really helped propel the European side, and just the hard enduros overseas really helped with those guys really wanting the plate. So it was nice to have Jarvis and Bolt and the Husqvarna off-road team running the product early on. It was about 2014 that they started running the product.
That's awesome. And then through that, you got some of the best in the business running, well, I know there's a better way of saying it, but like practice on your plates, right? So you're getting to see what works, what doesn't. Like, what are some of the evolutions that you've made over the years?
So the double stack came on pretty quick. So I realized right out of the gate that a single version or just a single sheet would wear through, particularly on the linkage, because it just takes more abuse than one would ever possibly imagine. So the double stack was the biggest portion of that progression, and it just deters it from the stack of it takes that force and that load out of the impact. So it just doesn't blow through straight out of the gate. So that was the biggest change straight out of the process. And then working with those guys, working with even my local guys, and everybody's like, "Hey, can you change it a little bit here or change it a little bit there? Or I'm catching my foot here. Can we recess that back a little bit?" So it's been good to just be friends with all those guys and have their feedback and be able to change stuff at a quick time so that it doesn't affect the end user, the customer eventually down the line.
Yeah. I remember that very first plate I got. I loved the whole thing, but I kept the shifter side, I kept getting my toe stuck on the little flap that came up around the frame there.
Yep.
And I'd couldn't tell if I was hitting the shifter or if I was hitting the flap. And I think one time I ended up just pulling over and took the trail saw and just cut it off a little bit, and it was good to go. But then from the next one I got was, modified, and never had a problem since. And it's been awesome.
Yep. Yeah. And I keep progressing, and it's just been good to have rider feedback and a lot of guys that are in my corner for me just to say, "Hey, can we do this? Can we do that? Can we figure something out here?" And mounting hardware has come a long way since day one. I was originally building everything on a hand mill in my shop, and now I've got full CNC guys doing the mounts, and we're just building a lot beefier mounts than I was building back then. Try to build them as tough as I possibly can so the plates don't come off. And that's probably the biggest change between me and other manufacturers is my mounting hardware is 4 to 5 times stronger than anything else on the market.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what do you feel sets you apart the most from other?
The material, for one, UHMW is a lot tougher material, density wise and just molecular structure wise. It's a lot beefier than the HDPEs out there, the nylons. A little tougher to work with is the only downside to UHMW. It's technically not thermal formable, so it takes a little bit of finesse to get it to do what I get it to do. So the heating cooling process is a big thing with UHMW, because its natural state is flat and it wants to stay flat. So it's just get it to do what I do from just experience with it. So it's kind of half technology, half hand and art form to get it to where I get the shapes.
How'd you originally settle on that as a material? How'd you even know that? Was that from the RV world?
Yeah, that was from the RV, and it was UHMW straight out of the gate is what they were using on those slide rooms to help them slide. And they basically had a piece on top and a piece on bottom, and it slid on itself. And I'd played with some other materials. I played with some HDPE, and my snow plates are actually HDPE, and a little bit thinner material, just because it heats so much better and it forms so much better because it wraps all the way up around the engine. So the snow bikes are a completely different plate from the dirt plate. But I tried some HDPE early on. It's kind of brittle in form, so if you do catch a sharp rock, it can crack straight in half. It's technically thermal formable and technically weldable, but the welds don't like to hold. So I played with a bunch of that early on, just to try and see if it was a viable product. And it's okay. It's just not as durable, and it's just not as good over time.
Right. And I feel like some of that welded joint stuff, after it takes enough abuse of scraping and, you know, impacts, it tends to want to split too.
Correct. Yeah. It's really hard to get a full penetration weld with plastic. Not like metal where you can get a full penetration all the way through to the other side. So it's kind of a surface weld as opposed to a full weld like a steel or aluminum weld would be. And the product's it's just really prone to cracking if it's hit hard. So that was kind of my out for it. And it doesn't flex well is the other thing too. So it's a lot more rigid material, where the UHMW has a little more flex to it for, you know, even suspension working. You and I probably wouldn't notice it, but a pro level guy would notice the lack of flex out of an aluminum plate or an HDPE plate as opposed to a UHMW plate, where it just has a little bit more flex and allows the frame to flex like it should from the factory.
Yeah, I remember hearing that for the first time, that people didn't like skid plates because they felt like the frame didn't flex. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yep. Right.
Yeah. Like, I just figured out what a soft mousse feels like. I'm like, come on.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. If somebody's putting lap after lap and day after day, they notice those small differences. You know, like a lot of the early Works connections had a aluminum and rubber mounting, so they had some flex to that plate, so it wasn't so rigid on the bike. And that's the other reason I only run as minimal mounts as I can. So I try to run just a front mount and a rear mount. I don't have a bunch of middle mounts in there to affect the way that the frame flexes or frame moves. So I try to run minimal mounts, but beefy mounts so they stay on, but trying to reduce all of that helps the frame flex overall at the end of the day.
Right. What does it look like? So have you basically gone full time with this now? You were saying about
I did. Ago? Yep. I left the automotive world at the end of 2019 and went full in 2020. And it's been good. It's been nice to peck away at the list that just never got done. It was literally, I tell people this and they still baffled. And I honestly don't know how I did this for 10 years straight up to this point, but I would work a full 8 to 5, which was normally a 7:30 to 6, 7 o'clock at night, get home, eat dinner, say goodnight to the wife and the kids, and come back up to the shop and work till 2 or 3 in the morning trying to get product built and out the door. And so it was a really big struggle for me to just try to even stay ahead and try to get orders out. And it was frustrating for me. It was frustrating for customers, frustrating for my family towards the end. It was, you know, I was basically non-existent. I was working 20 hours a day and working every weekend, just trying to keep up and trying to keep product on the shelf. And it was just a really good move to finally make that jump and be able to calm down a little bit and get some sleep at night and focus on projects that just hadn't got done. The fork slider was the one that I really was nice to get that finally knocked out. That's been in the hopper for like 4 years. We've had that thing designed. My buddy Jason Servey at Idaho Hard Enduro has done all my CAD work for me on mounts and on that product. And it was just really nice to see that finally come full circle and get that knocked out. So it's been good to have time during the day to get stuff done, because not everybody works at night like I was. So I get home and it's like, oh shoot, I need this or I need that. And it's like, well, so that delays it another day or delays another couple days by the time I get a hold of somebody to get stuff done. So it's been good to have daytime, good to have sleep, and good to have just life back.
Yeah, for sure. What are you looking to continue on in the future? You got any more projects you're working on?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things we're working on. I'm trying to get the fork slider for the rest of the bikes out there. KYB is the next on the list. So we have one 3D printed for the Yamaha, and I'm trying to figure out how to make that work on all the KYBs, but all the KYB fork lugs are just a touch different. So that's been the biggest hurdle, where KTM's got a pretty good span from 16 to 22. Yeah. They're all the same. So it's a nice, that was a good one to start with just because it fits so many models. But once you go into Yamaha, like even the 2-stroke fork lug is different than the 4-stroke fork lug. So it's been a challenge to get all those done and see what all it fits. So that's my next one, is getting Sherco Beta, getting all the guys, all those just finished up. So it's going to take a little bit to get those done, but I'm working on that portion. And then been working with Cody down at Aries Manufacturing a bit on some products. So a UHMW portion for his disc guard. So that's up next in the hopper. We'll have a UHMW fin to bolt on to his aluminum disc guard portion. So that'll be the one after that. And then hopefully start working on chain guides as my next one, once we get the fork lugs all done. So once I get those guys, and you might actually see a KTM chain guide before the rest of the fork lugs get done, just depending on how CAD work goes and how fitment goes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it seems like with the the growth of kind of the hard enduro sport, especially, there's no shortage of need for protection on the bike.
Correct. Yeah. Hard enduro has been a really good stage to, one, product test, and two, just come up with new product as well. Because like you say, it's super hard on the bikes, and it's a really good platform. Anytime that somebody's literally launching their bike 10 feet in the air and hoping everything stays together is a good platform to try and figure out new products. And honestly, that's probably what brought the version 3 of the handguard mount. If we've gone a full 2 millimeters thicker all the way around on that thing, just to try and keep them from bending, keep them from cracking in those hard impacts where you're really throwing a bike to the ground, or side impact is the hardest thing on that mount. Front impacts don't seem to be an issue. It's that throw it down on its side on a rock is the hard thing on handguards.
And then slide backwards kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Nice. What do you, what's your plan this year? Are you going to be at all the races, kind of the West Coast Enduro Series? Are you racing yourself, or?
Yeah, so I'll be at all the West Coast ones. We'll start. I'm going to try and go back to 6 days this year. So trying to qualify for ISDE again. And so I was scheduled to be down at a qualifier next weekend, which it got canceled in California. So we'll stay home for a week now, and then go down to Page, Arizona. So we'll be down Page, Arizona, Montana, the Silver Mountains back on. So I'll be doing that. And those, I just help out. I really like to sweep ride. I really like to help with the courses. I just like that, the whole format, and being able to help the event guys and just let them know from a rider's perspective what works, what doesn't work, and make it good for the riders is my goal behind it. So I really like that, just the helping people out and trying to make each event as good as possible for the top guys.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's really cool that Silver Mountain's back on with Inside Enduro stepping up and taking over that thing.
Yes, it'll be good. Yeah, it'll be good. And I think the Montana round with Evan's going to be a good round, having Evan Ask in charge of that one. And it's just going to be, I hope it just keeps growing and winds up like the European rounds, where fans and spectators are out on the course cheering and yelling and honking horns. And I really hope we get to that platform.
Yeah. So with your looking to get back into the ISDE, what's your training look like, and how you kind of getting prepared for that?
So I qualified on a 125 20 years ago for France. And then this year I'm going to try again on a 2022 KTM 125. So I chose that for a couple of reasons. One's for nostalgia, and two, to force myself to get back in shape. I really got lazy over the last 10 years of just grinding away at work and not riding much. And so
right. Well, only lazy and maybe the riding aspect, but definitely not in the work hours.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. My bike time, I think last year I rode more than I'd had in the last 5 years combined. Just getting back to a normal schedule and a normal routine, and not working all day, all night. So that was super good. And then I had a 450 last year that I was snow biking, and that kind of makes you lazy in turn as well. You can just whack the throttle and go. So I really wanted to drop some weight and get back in shape. So my wife had a Peloton, and I decided that was what I needed to do. So Christmas Day, I started my first workout, and just kind of been progressing with that, and trying to lose a little more weight than I am. I'm down about 10 pounds right now over what I was, and trying to drop at least another 5 just to help the 125 out. But it's been a good spur and a good motivation to be light enough for that 125, and just to be able to compete with guys on a 125.
That's awesome. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it from that perspective, because I mean, I think we can all, you're riding a 300, it's like 10 pounds, it matters, but it's not make or break. But I'd imagine with the 125, it probably makes a big difference.
Yeah, it's definitely, weight's a huge factor on that bike. And honestly, I've got about 12 hours on that bike now, and it's actually really good. It's super fun. Nice and light and nimble and powerful. If you got it in the right gear, it's going to go, and it goes well. So it's super fun going from a 450 back to that, and just being able to rip around. I mean, you're basically wide open all day. So whether you're going fast or not, it sure sounds like you're going fast.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's funny, the whole concept of, because I basically went straight to 300, and still can't ride the bike to its capabilities. But looking back at how, if you actually progress through the ranks correctly, you're starting out on that lower CC, you're learning to ride that thing basically wide open the entire time. And then, it just sets you up to make those jumps and your abilities and everything that much easier, especially like when you're looking at the trials bike side, right? I kind of did the same thing, forewent all the small shit, because I'm like, well, I'm a grown man. I'm not showing up on a 125.
Yep.
But then it's like you're riding a 300 at, in the first quarter of the throttle, and you wind it out and you start to get scared. So it's funny how, if you progress correctly, it increases your abilities, I think, a lot better.
It is. Yeah. And the 125 is really good for cornering. You really got to be on your game, and coming into a corner, you got to be set up perfect, and at the apex you got to be set up perfect, and coming out you got to be set up perfect. So it really makes you understand where you're losing in a corner, where a 300 or a 350 or a 450, you can come in and point and shoot wherever you want and just whack the throttle, and you're going to get through there pretty dang fast. But it's nice to have that progression, like you say, from the smaller bike. It really does help you once you get up into the bigger bikes and the more powerful bikes, because you still want to have that technique regardless of where, what bike you're on, if it's a 125 or a 250 or whatever it is, that technique never goes away.
Yeah, totally. So when you're out training on the bike, do you kind of go hit kind of some intervals, type thing? Or are you more just a volume, or what's that look like for you?
So 6 days now is sprint enduro style. So I've really been trying to just hone in on speed for short bursts of time. So initially was down Mattawa, Vantage area, down in desert. My buddy Rob's got a couple of really good turn tracks down there. And so we just go and hammer those turn tracks out, and they're like a 4 to 5 mile track, and just try to hammer out good motos and get that interval training down, because it's a completely new format to me. I've not done that. Generally 6 days is like a long trail ride. It's 100+ miles, and then you show up and you ride a test, and then you ride another 20-mile section, and then you show up and you ride a test, where now it's basically all tests. You show up and you race a test, and you go back to the truck and hang out, and you go race a test, and you go back to the truck. So it's going to be a little different for me to try and do that format. I'm definitely more of a, once I'm warmed up, I'm definitely better on the bike than cold out of the gate. So it's a little bit of a change for me. So it's been a lot of just short motos basically right now, and some longer trail rides, and we'll still sneak in like a 50-mile ride just for endurance. But it's going to be interesting. It'll be different.
Yeah, that is, because like, I mean, I'm not terribly familiar with a lot of those, but I've done Idaho City a couple of years, and it's always nice to come off cruising on the trail right into, get in line, wait 2 minutes, and then hit your test, instead of coming out of a chair for the last, hour or whatever it is, kind of cold, and then
Yeah.
you're supposed to get on there and rip.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's almost going to be kind of enduro cross-ish where you pull up to the gate and you go, and, you're done in 10 minutes and back out in the parking lot. So it's going to be very similar mentality wise to that. Just show up and hammer down and wait for the next one and do the same.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I want to be respectful of your time and appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I wish you obviously the best of luck this year and with SXS and everything else. And do you got anything? How can people get a hold of you, find your products, all that stuff?
So SXSlideplate.com is the website. You can get most everything's on there as far as plate stuff. If you don't see something, get a hold of me and just let me know, or shoot me an email. My contact info is on there as well, as long with the phone number. So yeah, SXSlideplate.com is the place to find me.
Awesome. Well, Jon, really appreciate it. And I think it was cool to learn about the origins of what you got going. And can't wait to see some of the races this year.
Yes, it'd be good. Yeah, I'm pumped to get back out and see everybody at the races. We had a GP last weekend. It was just fun to get out and see everybody again. And I just love showing up to the events and getting to see customers and put names with faces. And I see all these orders come through, and I never know who anybody is. But once they show up, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that order number. And you're down in California, you're in Missouri, or it's just nice to see the names with the face.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks again, and we'll be seeing you soon.
Sounds great. Thank you.